The Book of Thomas, saying number 9. This one's quite simple, and you would have all heard it at some point in your lives, and it's in the Bible as well, so it's not just in the Book of Thomas. But Jesus said, "Now the sower went out and took a handful of seeds and scattered them. Some fell on the road. The birds came and gathered them up. Others fell on the rock, did not take root in the soil, and did not produce ears. And others fell on thorns, and they choked the seeds, and worms ate them. And others fell on the good soil, and it produced good fruit. It bore 60 per measure, and 120 per measure." So, the sower went out. Now, the sower is your own higher consciousness. There are other texts where Jesus said, "Those that come to me hate their life." And he feeds the poor. He gives sight to the blind, the third eye blind, the poor in spirit. Spirit is consciousness. And that's what that's about. So me interpreting the scriptures is not me being a sower. It's merely me telling the truth that people just can't seem to grasp because of the programming, societal programming, everything that you've been taught and you've inherited from your fathers, your culture. Get rid of it. Think for yourself. Now, you have 3 brains, essentially. There is a 4th, which I'll speak about briefly. Your first brain is fight or flight. It's your reptilian brain. And it deals with emergencies, like a car's coming at you, and you've got to move fast without thought. So that's that. And you've all experienced this, that sudden surge of adrenaline, and you're instantly powered. The second brain is the limbic system, which is hormonally driven, emotionally driven. And the third brain is the neocortex, which is logic and reason. Now, if somebody is in the limbic brain, which is usually the religious, the political, and the patriotic, because those are they're emotional things, and they'll defend it no matter how absurd it is. And it's a logical. They'll use arguments that are logical fallacies, but because they're in the limbic system, they can't get into logic and reason because they're basically locking themselves out of that functioning part of the brain. And then, of course, you've got the reptilian system. Now, when people are in fight or flight mode, you can't reason or logic with them. You have to calm them down. So those are the basic 3 functions. There is also the cerebellum. In Latin, it's called the arbor vitae, which means the tree of life, and it's the small part of the brain at the back of the head. And science doesn't really know much about it. They say it coordinates movement, but it still remains a mystery, much like most of the brain remains a mystery. The mystery within. So this higher consciousness kind of arrives on the scene in the individual, because it's your brain. It's you, the individual. It's not a group Ginganguli. So it's just you alone. And your own higher consciousness will start to point things out to you. It will direct you, and you won't know it at first. Your taste will change, things will change. And those of you that are experiencing this already will know that. Those of you that are not, maybe you will. And one of the first things, or one of the things that you will experience is that your apple cart will be tipped over. Or if you want to put it another way, your the moneylenders' tables will be thrown in the air, and they'll be whipped out of the temple. Now, it's the sower is the messenger. Now, the modern word for messenger in religious circles, or in common parlance, is the word angel. Now, angel comes from the word angelos, which is Greek, which means messenger. And one of the famous messengers that we have today in our society is Hermes. And Hermes delivers your parcels, often from Amazon. Now, Hermes goes back to Hermes Trismegistus. In other words, Hermes, the messenger, thrice majestic. Three, the Trinity, majesty, the king. And that's what it's all about, higher consciousness. And it's been symbolized in many different stories, many different characters, names of men of renown of old, as mentioned in the book of Genesis. And so this higher consciousness will appear in individuals, and it will attempt to wake them up. But as it alludes to, the sower went out, which is the individual's higher consciousness, and took a handful of seeds, just planting things in your brain. And this is part of your life story. And it's the art you are. Everybody is having a hero's journey, but you need to wake up to that. You need to understand that you are the archetype. Look, I'll express it this way, right, which might ruffle some feathers. Everybody is Jesus, pretending to be the Apostle Paul. Okay? That's the deception. The Apostle Paul is symbolic of low consciousness. His name in Greek, Paulos, it means lowly and little. In Hebrew, his name is, in the Bible it's Saul, but in Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, it's Shaul. And when it's written without vowels, it's written and pronounced the same way as you pronounce Sheol. And Sheol is the Old Testament version of hell. Now, hell is a place of darkness where nothing is satisfied. It's just constant desires, no peace. Darkness is ignorance, no light, the light of consciousness. Neocortex, neo means one. Okay? So, the chosen one. Many are called, few are chosen. And that's what this is alluding to. This saying number 9. So this higher consciousness, this messenger arrives in the individual, and they don't respond because they don't understand. In other ancient texts it says, like for example, they see the light but they don't understand it. And Jesus appeared to the Apostle Paul when Paul was on the road to Damascus. And today, Damascus, the city, is the oldest inhabited city in the world. But Paul was on that road with his mates. So he wasn't an individual, he's with his mates. It's a ginganguli. And it's a wide path. Because if it was a narrow path, you'd be on your own. And when you're doing things on your own, it's difficult because you're on your own. But you're not, because your higher consciousness is there when you become aware of it. So you're not walking alone. Alone, all one. So Paul is symbolic of the wide path to destruction. He came from the tribe of Benjamin, or Benjamin. And they have a tribal coat of arms, which is a wolf. Beware the wolf in sheep's clothing. And even Paul talks about the great deception. He is the deception. That voice in your head, that ego intellect, It is just a collection of memories that has formed a persona. A persona is a mask, and you wear it. And you have a persona for all these different social conditions. A job interview. Ooh, let's put this mask on. Going to see somebody you care about, you wear that mask. All these different masks. Where's the authenticity? Do not lie. You see where this is going. So the Apostle Paul, the ego that is suffering the illusion of separation. It's an illusion. But the messenger goes out, casts the seed, but it doesn't take hold. The message is very simple. It really is. It's very simple. And the basic premise is clean your house and meditate. And everything will be taken care of for you by your older brother, your higher consciousness, because that consciousness was there when you was born. It was there before you were born. That's why God says, I knew you before you were born. I know every hair on your head. He's the creator. So the ego intellect is not consciousness. Consciousness is something that humanity can't understand from a scientific perspective, because it has to be observable, repeatable. But you can't observe consciousness, but you are aware of it. Consciousness is awareness. And the act of meditation is just to be still and to be aware. And then you'll have a split in your psyche. Psyche means soul, where you'll be observing your mind as the mind runs backwards and forwards like Satan. Satan means adversary. It's adversarial to higher consciousness. It causes people to stumble. It gets in the way. But it's just an illusion. When you realize that your mind is just a collection of stories, his stories, history, then you realize it's just a complete nonsense. It's just a story. It tells itself. I'm this, I'm that, you're this, you're that. And all these minds have forgotten what Jesus said. You are gods. It does not compute. Does not compute. People just can't get it. They just can't get it. Because, especially the religious, because they worship a god. And one of the prophets said, you worship what you don't know. And what he's saying is, you're worshipping nothing. You don't know anything. It's just a nonsense. And then Jesus said, you are gods. So Jesus is your own higher consciousness, which is an individuation of the universe consciousness. That's why Jesus said, I and the Father are one. It was once described to me like this. The ocean is the universal consciousness, so we'll call it the Father. Just for so you can, it's symbolic speech. It's symbolism, so you can understand it. So you've got the massive Pacific Ocean. And if you put a bucket of water into that ocean of pure consciousness, which is not tangible, it's not measurable, you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, but you know it's there. That's consciousness. And it's like an ocean. But if you dipped a bucket into it and took that bucket out and then froze it, and it then became solid matter where you could touch it, feel it, and it became material, it became matter. That would perfectly describe the Word in the flesh. That would be the perfect analogy for describing how humans or life emerges from this field of consciousness. And it's this field Some scientists call it the unified field, the universe, unified field, same thing. It's just consciousness. And when you become aware of it, it becomes aware of you. Then you've overcome the illusion of separation. Then death has lost its sting, because you don't die. Your body just returns from whence it came, the earth, but your consciousness returns to the ocean. But people have to, this stuff has to be experienced, not just known. You have to know yourself. You have to. This is an internal, physical and metaphysical experience, and it's a real game changer. And in societies today, worldwide, they're using fear, and they understand how the human psyche works. They've known this for a very long time. And they manipulate the narrative to keep people controlled, to control the minds, govern ment. Ment means mind. And even the politicians are being manipulated. They're just puppets. And when the human body is in a state of fear, it's in a state of distress. If the mind thinks there's a danger, the body will react to what the mind is telling it. Now the body, or the brain, doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So if the body is in a state of perpetual stress, worrying about money, job, health, pandemic, etc., etc., it will be constantly loaded with cortisol, or cortisone. It's a hormone. Now your body will then move into the limbic system and the fight and flight, and it will be bouncing between the two, like a crow going backwards and forwards, looking for land, somewhere safe. Can't find anything. Was it a crow or a raven? It was on Noah's Ark. Anyway, this hormone, it shuts down the neocortex. It turns off neurotransmitters in the brain, so people lose the ability to use logic and reason. My dad used to say to me, there's two types of danger. There's real danger and there's perceived danger. So when I was a young man in the forces and I was learning my trade, you'd be doing things like abseiling, and you'd be on some tower and you've got all these strange harnesses on, and you're with qualified guys, they've been doing it for years, but I've never done it before, and you're looking over the edge and it's a 50-metre drop and your ass starts to go. A bit fearful, but I'd always remember me dad's words. He'd say there's two types of danger. The real danger, if I fall, I'm going to have a de-acceleration trauma and it's going to kill me. That's the real danger. But I was wearing safety equipment and I was roped in, so I can't fall. So it's just a perceived danger. So then I have to tell my mind that I'm perfectly safe. I'm tied in, I can't fall. But when you have programming by society that you're only this, or you're only that, that's poisonous, and it keeps people locked into a box. I used to hear people say, I'm only a corporal. Fucking hell, where does it stop? What happens if the general says, oh, I'm only a general? Or the neurosurgeon, oh, I'm only a neurosurgeon. Where does it stop? And we shouldn't do these things to each other. But more importantly, you shouldn't do it to yourselves, because you're a lot more than you've been taught. And that's why meditation and cleaning the house is so important, because you will have this very real, internal, metaphysical experience. And you will transcend what your mind has been taught. But you will transcend all the inherited nonsense, the traditions, the societal programming, all the cultural norms, whatever the fuck they are. And then you'll realize that the lowly and little consciousness, the Apostle Paul, is constantly judging everybody. It's a perpetual cycle of judgment, and it keeps people in a perpetual cycle of fear. But when you transcend that and you raise that energy, then you'll understand what real knowledge of good and evil is. And it's not the lowly and little interpretation of good and evil. Now, I'm not promoting solipsism. There is good and evil in the world. I don't have to explain that to people. What I'm saying to you is that there is an internal experience that transcends the ego intellect's understanding of good and evil. In other words, what I'm saying to you is that you will be shown the universe's interpretation of what's good and what is evil, not mankind's. And that's a completely different benchmark. And that's what you should be looking at. That's why the character Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God, and all will be revealed or given to you. But it's a narrow path, and it's difficult, and you're going to stumble, you're going to fall on your ass, but it's part of it. You know, and it's a warrior's journey, not a worrier's journey. It's for a matador, not a fucking doormat. So it's not about being a sword-wielding monster where Jesus says, go out and buy a sword. He's not talking about buying a physical sword to defend and fight. No. That's your sword. Speaking the truth. Telling people the truth. Explaining these simple stories so people can chew the cud like a clean animal, as opposed to just swallowing everything whole like a filthy swine. You know, and chewing the cud, because we've all inherited nonsense. And as I was going through the chewing the cud phase, and I still do chew the cud constantly, but I'll entertain two ideas. Like, for example, I'll give you a ridiculous example. The Christians believe largely that Jesus Christ is going to appear in the sky on a white horse called Faithful and True, and all the saints will be around him and every knee will bow. That's the Christian image of the return of the character called Jesus Christ. Now, anybody above the age of 3 would, in fact children would, like, now that's a bit absurd. Just think about it, it's just absurd, but people actually believe this, and they cling to this belief because in their fearful mind, if they don't believe it, they'll be cast into hell. And religion is a fear-based thinking, and they'll defend it to the death. Islam. Now, Jesus appearing in the sky on the clouds on a white horse, I'll explain it to you, so you can, as individuals, can chew the cud. So I've given you the religious template, which sounds rather absurd, bit of a fairy story. Or could it be this? The sky is consciousness, it's symbolic language, and the clouds are thoughts, and they come and go. And he comes on the clouds like a messenger, and he's delivering seeds, hoping they'll grow. Now, the white horse is the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is part of the brain, and it's white, and hippo is Greek, it means horse, and it's faithful and true, it's the truth. And then you remember who you really are, and then because you've transcended the lowly and little story that the ego intellect has been telling itself. And then you realize that your higher self has always been there, that the Father has always been there. And then the Mother arrives, the Comforter. Now, I'm just talking about these things, but I've experienced these things. It's an internal thing. Now, some of you, I know that some of my listeners have experienced this. So when I'm explaining it, they're joining their dots and they're going, that's, so they understand. But there are others that are seeking, they want to understand so they can respond. That's fine. Now, when these clouds arrive, it's going to challenge everything that you've believed. And all that shit is going to get thrown right out the window. This window. It's going to get fucking booted out. And you're going to feel naked. Adam and Eve in the garden, naked. And then God turns up and says, who told you you're naked? It's a concerned father. Okay? So, you're not naked. The illusion of separation. When you overcome it, the mind, the lowly and little mind, when you overcome the illusion of separation, when you overcome all your belief systems and all the nonsense we've inherited, you'll feel naked because you'll be like, who am I? And that is where the journey starts. That is the precipice of the enlightenment. And it's like standing before an abyss. Let go. And just fall. But you don't fall. You don't fall. You get lifted up. Matthew, in ancient Hebrew, his name is Matanyah. In fact, was it Matthew? Oh no, it wasn't Matthew. Which means Yah's gift, incidentally. Oh, I can't remember who it was now. I'm going to have to do the names, actually. I've mentioned this before. But, who was it? There's one of the disciples, and his name means Yah lifts up. That's some scribbles I did earlier on. But now this camera is back to front, so I'm going to have to do it back to front. So, because of the lensing. So, this is the Father, and he's reaching down. This is ancient Hebrew, not that Yiddish shit today, okay? And he's reaching down, and there's a little man, and he's got his arms up, like that. And then there's here, something like that, and there's another figure, like this. And the name is, in modern Hebrew, it's kind of like that, like the shape of a man ish. Okay, so that's Yah, and the name is, this is just names, it's just symbolism, so don't get all, ooh, name of God, and just calm down, okay? So Yah O Wah, Yod Hey Wah Hey, Yod Hey Wah Hey. There is no Vav in ancient Hebrew. Some people say Yahweh or Yod Hey Vah Hey, but in ancient Hebrew there was no Vav. A Vav is a V. There is no V. Okay, so Yahweh, Yahweh, and it's based on the name Haya, or Ahaya, which means I am, which is consciousness. I, the individual, am a state of being. Okay? And he introduced himself to Moses on the mountain. And it was the burning bush that wasn't consumed. Your brain is like a burning bush. It's not consumed. It's the electrical impulses, which are also messengers. They deliver messages, and you have to interpret them. Okay? So, that's the arm of the universe, reaching down like a father, reaching down to lift his child up. This is Abraham. That's his wife Sarah. But in the beginning, it wasn't Abraham. He became Abraham later, the father of many nations. Ab-Ra-Ham. Ab is the father, Ra is light. Okay, so Abraham, Sarah. Now it's a play on words now. Sarah, Abraham. Cerebrum. Cerebrum. The cerebrum, the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Bloody pen's running out. Abraham is the ego intellect that's enlightened, and Sarah is the divine subconscious mind, the divine feminine, the beautiful princess. And this here is the child. Because God said to Sarah and Abraham, you'll have a child. Oh, don't be stupid, she's 90 years old, the old bag, or something like that. But it's just symbolic language, and the child is the sacred secretion. And it contains DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and it makes you happy. And you have visions, and one of the visions you'll see is a rainbow. Colours, beautiful colours. And that is the promise that God made with Abraham. That is the covenant, the rainbow. That's God's promise, your brain. And you can see this with your third eye. Now, the child in modern language is called Isaac, but in Hebrew it's called Yitzhak. And Yitzhak means laughter. Okay, joy. The Garden of Eden actually means the garden of joy, because when this DMT is in the brain, it's joy. Now, this is the child. Okay. Now it talks on that saying, number 9, the book of Thomas. It talks about the measures. There was a 60 measure and a 120 measure. Now we're getting into ancient mysticism, or the way they coded things. There are only 9 numbers. Bloody pens. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are only 9 numbers. Like 11 and 12, it's just carrying on, it's multitudes of. So that's your base. 0 doesn't count, because 0 is nothing. Nothing has no quantity, so it's not a number, it's not a measure. Nothing is nothing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Endocrine system, the chakras, or the 7 seals in the book of Revelation. 6 is the number of man. Okay? 6 is the number of man. He's fallen short of the mark. The mark is 7. In Hebrew, it's shin. In modern words, they call it sin. So if you haven't hit the pineal gland, you are a sinner. That's it. It's not about what mankind interprets what a sinner is. This is higher than that. So somebody who's let's say a murderer, a thief. Now remember, Jesus visited these people, tax collectors. He sat down with centurions. He sat down with society's worst people because they hated their lives. And those that overcome the ego and they raise the sacred secretion and they achieve 7 enlightenment, okay, they have reached what is known as perfection. 8 is the mother. 8 is infinity. This is 33, also symbolic of higher consciousness or Christ consciousness. 3 A B C, third letter of the alphabet, Christ consciousness, CC. Anyway, just playing with numbers and letters. But if you invert an 8 to its side, you get the infinity symbol. If you draw a line and twist it around a little bit, you get 33. So it's all there. It's just symbolism. They're all symbols, and they tell many stories. And the Father is 9. That's the universe, 9. Now, 6 and 160 and 120. Get rid of the 0, means nothing. It has no value. So 6 and 12, 18. 8 and 1, 9. And if you look at the saying, and others fell on the good soil, and it produced good fruit. And Jesus said, look at the fruits they bear. So it's your own inner landscape. This is your soil, this here in your temple, the Garden of Eden. What fruit is your tree producing? Buddha sat under a tree. Now, Buddha is symbolic of Christ consciousness. It's just another story. And he sat under a tree for 7 years. I'll draw the tree for you, shall I? It's like this. And there's the tree. And there's the root chakra. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The brain's hemispheres, they're working in sync. And 9. And we come back to this. 9, the Father reaching down to help his children. 9. Now, if you're suffering the illusion of separation, you're an orphan because you don't know the mother and father. So, you clean your house, you raise that energy. The child is found, and they reach up. Like a child falls, it reaches up, and the parents bend down. A good parent bends down and rushes to the child. Do you see? The Father meets you halfway, the parable of the prodigal son. And everybody can experience this. But you have to allow, you have to chew the cud, you have to understand these things, you have to own this knowledge. And then when you have the experience, the internal experience, that can never be taken from you. Never. It doesn't matter what happens to you then. You know, and that's just the start of it. That's just the start. That's just the doors opening. Because then you have choices. Because the Father will give you anything you desire. But as I alluded to in saying number 8, don't take the little fish. We're too close to something really big, which I'll explain in later videos. Some of you already know about. But don't busy yourself with little fish. Take the big fish. So that was saying number 9. It's a very simple saying, but there's quite a lot of meat on it. And I've expounded on it as well to give you something to chew on. And an animal that chews the cud and parts the hoof, in other words, it goes its own way. It's an individual narrow path. Yeah? That's a clean animal. It's an individual. Alright? That's what it's about. Because the truth is inside you. It's not inside anybody else. It's funny because in the world everybody's looking for love. And we all are. And it's seldom found. But there's a love inside you. And it goes out. But you become quite choosy about who you share it with. And it's difficult as well because it can be quite overpowering. So like I said, be prepared to have your moneylenders' tables thrown up. And also as well, Jesus halted the sacrifices. He went into the temple and he released all the sacrificial animals, set them free. Your dietary desires will change. You'll understand that eating dead flesh is not good for you. It's dead flesh. It's just not good for you. Just think about it. Logic and reason. Eating dead flesh. Putting dead flesh into a living thing. You are not a meat eater. Lions and hyenas, dogs, they do that. They're designed to do that. You're not. Okay, there was Moses was in the wilderness with the in fact, I'll cover this in the next video because I'm about to run out of time. Speak in a minute.